Hello, and welcome back to another meeting of the Geek Cabal. Cabal Whisperings, and this is podcast episode 10, made up to Big 10.
Yep.
Today's date is October 8th of filming, so kind of later in the week than we normally do when we film, but,
Yeah.
believe it or not, we actually do stuff other than just sit here and film all the time, so, uh, you know, obligations and stuff, work.
Yes. Yes. Many obligations.
So,
Some social even.
yes, yes. Like, I'll go out and, as the gamers say, I go out and touch grass occasionally. Oh. Well, yeah. So we've got a spooky agenda today because obviously October we have to be spooky because there's no other month in the year that we can be.
Well, I mean, we could be all the time. Like, there's nothing really stopping us, but we for sure will be this month.
Yeah. And then we want to make sure we keep spooky, not creepy, because
Yes, important distinction.
we don't want to be,
However, this might all bleed over into November too, because even though Thanksgiving's there, like, unless we're going to be just like eating a bunch of food here or something, like, I don't really know how we maintain a theme for that.
We're gonna go watch Thanksgiving.
We'll talk about that here in a minute.
All right. So yeah, I was gonna say as far as channel news and stuff goes, I just got done recording a. Well, first of all, I'm not dressed up for any particular reason. I'd gone to church and Sunday, so I'm wearing my Sunday best. Wanted to look good for everybody, but um, uh, I just got done filming my 7th unboxing. Had to go back and count, make sure I had 7 of them in there.
Yeah.
And I do. So we're getting edging closer to that number 10, which, like I said, as I stated, will be a may not. Some people may be like, "Well, why is that his 10th?" But the reasoning why is because it's something that is crucial to the entire video game industry. It is very important. It's very instrumental into where we're at today. So,
It's the actual dot from the game Pong.
yeah, it's just the dot.
Yeah.
And then Bob just got done filming a episode, which we've got some of the props propped up back here. If you're watching us on the YouTube, if you're not, the prop that I was pointing to that you can't see because it's a podcast is a my CED. So if you don't know what that is, at some point I'm going to do a video on that. But it's a video format. Looks like a record, but it's not a record. It is a movie that you can play in a player of Halloween 3: Season of the Witch.
Yes. Two side notes on that. Jim had some of these for us for our Star Trek retrospective that we did. So if you didn't see that, you can see more of them there. But also, just to be clear, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch has no connection to the Nicolas Cage movie Season of the Witch, which was quite disappointing, I'm not going to lie. Because I found out about the movie before it came out, like seeing like what's coming up, what's coming soon, a couple years, and one of them was listed as Season of the Witch, and I was like, all right, some insane bastard decided to remake Halloween 3. This is going to be great. And then I found it as a Nicolas Cage movie, and I hit a low, but then I hit a high again once I realized it's Nicolas Cage as a medieval knight trying to escort a witch somewhere, and I was like, all right, I'm down.
Yeah, sounds like a Tuesday for him. So
Pretty much. So yeah, that's what we recorded. So those are going to come out after this comes out. So if you're watching this when it first comes out, those are not out yet, because I'm going to aim to get this out first, hopefully.
Yeah, and as I say, as far as our subscriber count, we're teetering on the edge of 300.
Yes, and once we cross that, hopefully we can get everybody together to film an episode.
We have other people.
Yes, we do, and we are trying to get them together digitally. We've been having to do a bunch of stuff on our end, and I think there's really just one main other test of things we have to run.
Well, if that doesn't work digitally, I just say that we'll turn them into to AI chatbots, and we'll just have them be on the podcast.
Did you watch any of those videos I sent about the AI stuff?
I'm trying to remember what I watched because I did watch some.
All right, well, we'll talk about it at the very end. If it'll either refresh your memory or it'll sound new and awesome, one of the two. Or horrifying, just depending on how you want to look at it. So, as far as channel news, I think the only other thing is obviously we've been cutting these down, making clips out of some of these, and been trying to splice out things that are mildly entertaining. If I had something super awesome, I'll definitely cut it. But anything I can get down to like a minute where a cohesive thought is expressed, I've been turning into shorts. We might at some point actually specifically make shorts. I do have some ideas. We'll have to see. But they're kind of time consuming. One of the ideas I have, like way more than it should be for a 1 minute video. But
And I know we put some of our shorts on Facebook as Facebook Reels.
yes,
So, um, be interesting if we get, if you found us through Facebook, that would be a,
yeah,
because I know that there's definitely, I couldn't tell you the people that I've watched on Facebook Reels, but that is definitely a way to get just a flood of stuff out there. So yeah,
yeah,
definitely let us know if you did find us from the Facebook page, because
yeah.
that'd be.
And then the other thing is we've been, well, I've been, and I've mentioned it to Jim, tinkering with the idea of possibly doing like Amazon affiliate marketing for some of our videos. Now, if we do go that route, just to be crystal clear, that doesn't mean every video is going to turn into us pimping something for Amazon. What it means is if we're talking about something that we would already be talking about that is sold on Amazon, there'll be an affiliate link in the description.
Yeah, I think also in the description, what I like to see is where people put the equipment that they're using in
Yes,
there as well.
if we do decide to go that route, we will make an episode to explain the assorted pieces of equipment that we're using in case any of you want to go that route yourselves, and also explain a little bit more about the affiliate marketing probably in that episode. And then from then on, all the episodes that we use this equipment, those links will just be permanently down there. But linking back to like, say, if you want to know more about it, watch this episode. But mainly like the BattleTech book reviews I do. If you want to buy physical copies of those books, you cannot buy them through Catalyst. They only sell ebooks, as near as I can tell. Unless like my search abilities just really suck. So to buy a physical one, you have to either go through Amazon because they use a print-on-demand service through Amazon, or a secondary seller. So that's the kind of thing where like it's not even me just pimping it because it's on Amazon. That's the only place to buy it. Uh, or like the Lego sets or whatever. But we're not going to specifically focus on those. It's just if we're talking about them, if we do this, if we're talking about them, there's going to be links. Uh, because I found out there's a lot of things that we can't say in the videos if we do that. Like we can't mention the price, and apparently that little blurb that some people do about like do this and you'll help support the channel, like you're not supposed to do that. They can like cancel your thing if you do that. You're only just supposed to mention, hey, it's an affiliate link. Yes, that does mean you get money from it. No, it doesn't cost you anything extra.
Yeah, but I think it's important though that you say that though, because otherwise, how would people even know what the affiliate link does?
Well, right, you can explain it, but you can't put it in the terms of like you're doing it to help us. You know,
Oh,
you can be blunt and say we will get a commission for this, essentially. But
but
you can't be like, oh, you're doing it to help the channel, because apparently that's some kind of deceptive advertising. It's Amazon that has the problem, not YouTube.
well, I'd figure it was Amazon, but it still doesn't make any sense because they're
I,
getting sales and.
I would think they'd encourage it because of what you just said,
But yeah, so
so that's why I've been hesitant because I want to make sure we dot all the i's and cross all the t's, and you know. So yeah, and if we do go that route, first and foremost, the bulk of anything that comes from that is going to improve the equipment here on the channel. So just so you know,
yeah, I
because
doubt
I think I can say that.
I doubt it's going to be feeding anybody or keeping
Yeah,
anybody from
no,
going.
no, no, no. We're not gonna be able to buy Owen's textbooks like we promised in the other video. Uh, so that's
but
that's that, that's what Patreon's for,
but
Jim.
no, I mean anything that we can do to help out like that.
Right.
I also think it'd be great to set up a PO box so if people want to send us stuff to review and look at and do all that. So
Yeah, I mean we can do that. I'll look into that. So we might that's something we might do in the future. If you guys, any of you listening to this, think that's a good idea, let us know. But anyway, that's I think that's most of the channel business. And like you said, it's October, so definitely expect assorted horror movie things to be popping up here. Because, like I said, we're doing something with the Halloween movies. That's probably going to be like a 5-part series for reasons I explained in part one. Then I do want to do something with the Romero zombie movies. Not so much retrospective, but something kind of like the franchise fixes, even though they don't need fixed. But it's inevitable someone's going to try to remake some of them. So, again, I should say, because two of his six movies have been remade, and one of them, the name has been appropriated for another zombie movie. So,
But speaking of remaking and stuff like that, there's definitely reasons to not do it. And from what I've all heard so far, the Exorcist Believer is supposedly a terrible.
well, it's not a remake. That's a sequel.
Oh, I know, and
But
well,
but but to your point, yeah, I've seen some of the reviews definitely say it's awful. So
uh, yeah, they said that and again, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm telling you, like when people I trust to do good reviews are like, this thing is the most awful, whatever,
yeah,
and they
well,
and they bought it for $400 million.
good lord,
So not only do they have to make $400 million amongst three movies, they got first of all they got to turn a profit on these movies, but the profit's now going to have to include splitting up the $400 million they paid for the rights.
yeah, I yeah, that one's kind of a tough sell because versions time, folks. Have you ever seen the original Exorcist?
Yeah,
Okay, do you think it's a scary movie?
no, but I don't think that means it's a bad movie,
No, I
though.
didn't say it's a bad movie. I said you think it's a scary movie.
No, it's not something that kept me up at night.
Okay, but there are people that do. There are people that think it's like the scariest movie ever made.
Well, there is a reason to it, and it's a reason why I stay away from certain movies. Is anything of the occult, possessions, and stuff like that,
Yeah,
especially being a Christian.
yeah, no, no, I get it.
Those like me personally, I can separate myself from those movies.
Right.
It's not like the people that are like, oh, you go watch Harry Potter and you're a heathen or whatever. And I get it. It's art. It's art in a different way. But I can see why people, because there's people that have a fear of like the occult and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I kind of get that. So I could get where, because
Okay, but I bring it up, and actually for kind of the reason you're talking about. So there are people that think that's just a wildly scary movie. I don't. I didn't watch it until I was in my 20s, but I did see it in a theater as a special edition. Um, there's a few creepy moments, and they're all scenes that weren't in it originally. Like the creepiest stuff they cut out. So I have no idea what people back in the 70s found it so horrifying. Now, obviously, that's because we had the 80s, the ultimate decade of horror movies, which just kind of like shifted the goalpost dramatically, like three fields over as far as horror movies go, and then following that up with like things like Final Destination and The Grudge and everything that just keeps shifting things. So like the standard for horror has definitely changed, and the problem is, like you said, I'd be willing to bet that you're right that a lot of people that really find it terrifying are more religious people, and the number of those people has been on the decline in this country for quite a while. So the audience that's going to find it terrifying is low, and that's what a horror movie has to get a reaction for people to want to go see it again or to say it's good. Now it doesn't have to be horrifying; it can be funny. That can
yeah,
happen too. And one of the movies I'm going to talk about actually falls more in that. But it has to get some kind of reaction, otherwise it just is, or it just sucks. And I've got the feeling that that's part of the problem is that they try to, not having seen it, probably try to take similar tacks to what they thought worked in the first movie, and those things just don't work now. And maybe I could be way off base on that because I haven't seen it, but making a 40-year-old sequel, like, because I'm also willing to bet it totally ignores parts 2 and 3 that already exist. So
that I don't know. So,
I've only ever seen part 1 and 3. I never watched part 2.
but though that's the thing about any movie. I mean, especially horror movies, is that it's subjective to the person that's watching it. Because um, to me, like slasher movies get to me because of my anxiety. I have high anxiety, so jump scares, stuff like that. It doesn't. It bothers my anxiety. It doesn't scare
Yeah,
me by
yeah,
any
yeah.
means.
Slasher movies are the cheap scares, like,
Um,
but they work.
and then same thing with like grotesque movies, like where you have, like I said, my big thing is bones coming out of the body. I can't. stomach that. That's like my thing. Everybody's got the. But for me, it's the stuff that messes with your mind, stuff that's unnatural. Now, Exorcist does have that to a point, but not to like when I remember The Grudge and that one girl's like crawling down the stairs and it's just completely unnatural. Me seeing that, it would be a pants soiling moment for me.
Well, that's you remember how I said that like the unsettling moments and the scenes that weren't in the original
Yeah,
movie. There is a scene in the director's cut, special edition, whatever, where Reagan is like upset, like she's spider crawling, but like her back is to the stairs with her,
yeah,
down the stairs. That wasn't in the original, but it's in the other version.
yeah.
And I distinctly remember seeing that in the theater, and like right after that, it goes to a black screen for a moment as it cuts to the next scene. And there was definitely a woman in the theater behind me who's like, "Oh hell no!"
uh, but
It's a lively audience for that movie.
but yeah, so like I enjoyed like say for example, I enjoyed the Blair Witch, but I didn't find it surprisingly scary. I thought it was a good, and
Yeah.
there was a little bit of the anticipation kind of anxiety to it, but it wasn't a bad one. It wasn't like a jump scare one. But that scene at the very end of that, where the guy's just standing in the corner and not doing anything, it's just like,
Yeah.
and I love that because the fact that you never see anything. There was no reveal of anything, and there never will be. Hopefully, a reveal of anything.
Oh, you haven't seen the new one,
Well,
have you?
the new one doesn't count because they're stupid.
The new one, like you see the thing.
And see, that's the problem. That's why the original and the sequel to the Blair Witch was great as well because it played it off as the Blair Witch
It was a movie.
a movie
Yeah.
and did its own thing. Now, was it as good as the original? No, but it had its own unique thing
Yeah,
to
it tried to do something different.
And not saying it's going to be a classic that everyone's going to remember, but Blair Witch will be. Blair Witch 2 is just, if you haven't seen it.
The Book of Shadows? Come on, Jim. That'll go down too. It's the third one. It's just called Blair Witch. It, although, for whatever it's worth, I'll give them credit. Like, the thing looked truly horrifying. Like, whenever you see it, like, it is very horrific.
Well, that's like the difference between The Thing and then the remake of The Thing, where people are like, yeah, all the stuff looks crazy, but it looks CGI. It doesn't look practical. You lose
Yeah.
you lose some of it when you can see these people are actually interacting with it. Like the one when the guy's like operating on the one guy on the table and he's like doing something, the thing just like,
Yeah, he's trying to do chest. He's about to do the defibrillators and goes down the. Yeah.
That was all practically done versus CGI. You're going to be like, oh, it's. And well, I know we've talked about this in a previous podcast, but that movies now are doing CGI blood so they can take them out for different audiences. And I think they should just go with practical blood and then just digitally remove it. Who gives a crap if it looks stupid? Because then you can just blame those other countries that are like, oh, blood, it's so.
Yeah. Well, the one TV edit that I always find hilarious is actually in Ghostbusters. Uh, like, there's two different TV versions of the movie. There's one where they haven't cut anything out, and then there's one where they changed some of the dialogue. Like towards the end of the movie, whenever they bring the Ghostbusters and Walter Peck in to see the mayor, uh, if you're watching it on a more family-friendly channel, Ray will be like, everything was going fine until Wally Wick over here cut the power. And what he says in the regular movie is, until Dickless over here cuts the power. And then it cuts to Peter, and the mayor's like, is this true? And Peter's like, yes, Your Honor, he's some kind of rodent, but I don't know what kind, is the edited one. And the other one's like, yes, Your Honor, this man has no dick. He's like, well, that's what I heard. So I was watching, for whatever it's worth, apparently the Sci-Fi Channel doesn't edit it. I don't remember which channel does. But yeah, like it's just one of those little weird things on. I don't think anything else in the movie's cut. There might be one or two other comments here and there, maybe a little bit, maybe scenes shaved a little bit for time. But it's just funny that that movie would have edits to it.
Yep.
It's kind of like how Attack of the Clones. There's a scene where Obi-Wan and Django are fighting, and one of the two of them headbutts the other one, and that little bit is cut out for Britain because they can't depict headbutts in movies and stuff. So. Yeah, there's all kinds of weird things they can't do over there.
I mean, that is in the gaming world. That is about as bad as the Super Nintendo version of Mortal Kombat with the blood replaced with sweat.
So yeah, yeah, that's all channel business.
Well,
on to our actual topics.
well, I was gonna say that's kind of into the movie category.
Yeah, yeah. So we got a few things here on the movie front. Now, as I saw something the other day where, and I didn't catch if this was a rumor, if this was something people wanted to happen, but the idea is interesting, so we're going to briefly talk about it here. Apparently, Christopher Nolan may or may not be in the running to make a James Bond movie.
I've seen some stuff on that.
But it's going to be like one set in the '60s or '70s, so it won't be part of the main line. And I am like 1,000% for that.
Because he's the okay. This is just showing my stupidity. He's the one that did the Batman trilogy, right?
The Batman trilogy.
Because I would say the scene in uh, Dark Knight Rises looked like it should have been right out of a James Bond film with them hooking the plane.
Yeah, yeah.
So I honestly I could see that being a good thing. So because it should be over the top and
right. But he also did Dunkirk, which is set in World War II, and it's very period specific. Seemed to check all the boxes right. Um, he's also done like Inception and Tenet, but he also did Oppenheimer, which is also very period specific. So he can definitely do period movies. He can do the over the top stuff, and I want to see like '60s Bond, just wading through Spectre agents like there's no tomorrow, and the one that everyone like mimics when they mimic Bond is '60s and '70s Bond.
yeah. I mean I would go with a combination or either a Sean Connery or a Roger Fleming type
Roger
Bond.
Moore.
Sorry, Roger Moore.
Yeah, it's Ian Fleming wrote the
Ian
books.
Fleming
Yeah.
wrote yes. Ian Fleming wrote the books. Roger, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm close.
No, I see how it happened. Don't worry.
Okay.
But yeah, like, and I hope it's like up against. I'd prefer it to be against Spectre, but if it's got to be an evil billionaire, whatever.
With a table with a laser on it.
Yes, Auric Goldfinger.
Wait, you got to be holding his cat while he's petting his white fluffy cat.
Oh, that's different villains, Jim.
I know.
Goldfinger is the one that actually could have killed Bond. The others are the ones that all just kind of dick around and don't get anything done.
You talking about Doctor No?
Yeah, Dr. No probably could have killed him at some point. Although Dr. No is definitely the inspiration for the end of the first Austin Powers movie. That's why Dr. Evil has the suit on, like the containment suit. That's from Dr. No. Like the whole like drilling thing is kind of like Dr. No's plan. But yeah, by and large, he's supposed to be a copy of Blofeld, though. Specifically, the Donald Pleasance version from You Only Live Twice. Because up till that point, you never see him. You only see, like, from here down and the cat. And then that's the first time you see him. And apparently, peak evil is an egg shape. So, yeah, that's from one of, I think, the honest trailers for the Bond movies. Like, you may not like it, but this is what peak evil looks like, folks. An egg. And it shows, like, Goldfinger in his, shorts and shows Dr. Evil. And, yeah, no, not Dr. Evil. I just said his name, Blofeld. So, yeah. But anyway, I would be 1,000% for that. I don't know who would be good as Bond, but having seen The Man from U.N.C.L.E., I think Henry Cavill could do the job. He's a little bit bigger than Bond normally is, but I think he could do it.
As long as before every fist fight he loads his guns before.
Yeah,
does the fist pump before.
Yeah, in fact, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. is a look at like what a modern Bond movie set in the '60s would look like, probably. So. But yeah, I'm also kind of a sucker for that time period in movies, even if they're modern interpretations. It's one of the reasons why I loved X-Men First Class.
Yeah, so. I mean, that you got to bring back the Austin Martin.
Yeah.
The DB5, I believe it was.
Yeah, all the gadgets, Q, the whole lot. Yeah.
Moneypenny.
Everyone walking around drinking and chain smoking, like. Yeah.
Be in the hospital smoking a cigarette.
Probably.
While you're holding your newborn baby.
Yeah.
Giving the baby its first puff.
Yeah, I don't remember what TV show it was, but it was, there's a commercial for it. This is like 10, 12 years ago. And it's one of those like an adult's like flashing back to when he was a kid. And he's like getting a checkup from the doctor. The doctor's sitting there puffing away on the cigarette, and the kid starts coughing. It's like, oh, looks like you get a little bit of bronchitis there. And it's like, no, it's because he just blew a mouthful of smoke in his face.
Well, hell, that reminds me, just held back in the day when I worked at Walmart and they still had the smoking lounge inside the.
Yeah, remember how everyone used to believe that, like, oh, you sit on this side of the restaurant, there's no smoke. What do you mean you've got one just air system circulates all the air everywhere? Surely that's not a problem.
Uh,
Those were wild times. Smoking sections, smoking on airplanes.
uh,
Jesus. But yeah, talking about those wild times. Now into some movies I watched this week. I watched three movies I want to talk about. The first one is on Amazon Prime, the Prime Video. That one is a new movie that just came out on there called Totally Killer. And I had seen trailers for it, so I thought it looked good. I watched it the other day. This teenage girl in the present day, she lives in this town that like 30 some odd years ago, there were three murders right around Halloween, known as the Sweet 16 murders, because the person that killed the girls stabbed each of them 16 times. You never actually find out the significance of that either. They just don't even mention it. So, uh, then her mom gets killed in the present day. And it looks like the killer's back. Because the killer just kind of disappeared and no one
yeah.
ever found out who it was. Well, her friend was a science fair building a time machine based on her mom's designs. And because her mom was a genius, and so is she. And like I didn't see this part in the trailer, so I didn't know how she wound up in the past. Once I saw this, like this is preposterous, but in a great way. Let's see where this goes. So yeah, so she winds up back like 2 days before the three killings happen because they each happen like 2 days apart, with the final one on Halloween. And so she's like, all right, well, I've got to stop the murders, because like I'm here, so I may as well. And so she goes to her friend's mom and explains who she is. And she's just like, oh, okay. And a few minutes later, she's like, you're taking this whole like I'm from the future thing really well. And she's like, well, you don't consider building a time machine without considering maybe someone's going to come back in time to talk to you. She's like, oh, well, I guess that does make sense. And so, like, at one point, she's like, well, I'm just going to try to, like, convince the cops these murders are going to happen. And so she goes up to him, and the sheriff, it's the guy that plays Jimmy Woo, by the way, is the sheriff here. And in the Ant-Man movies, the federal agent who has to watch over Scott Lang. Funny guy. I don't know his name off the top of my head, though. His real name. His character's name is Jimmy Woo in Ant-Man. So she comes up, she's like, guys, have you ever seen Back to the Future? And they're both like, no. And so she's trying to explain the time travel thing, and they're just like, I don't believe you. You don't believe you for 1 minute. And so she leaves, and as she's walking away, they're both just like, I don't like time travel movies. They never make any damn sense. And so she goes to the high school, and she's like, yeah, I'm a transfer student from, I don't remember where in Canada she says she's from. And the woman just like hands her a sheet of paper. Here's your schedule. And she's like, you don't need to like verify any of that. She's like, why? And so later on, she's trying to get someone's schedule. She comes back up and says, hey, me again. I need this person's schedule. Like, she starts going to the explanation. The woman just gives her the schedule. And she's just like, man, the 80s are wild. But right after she gets there, she comes to this woman, hey, what year is it? It's 1987. She's like, 1987? She's like, yeah, I know. The 80s are almost over, and I haven't even done coke yet. There's quite a bit of like, person from the present's like, man, this is just wild back here. Also with a whole lot of like, wow, you guys are just like wildly sexist and racist, aren't you? Kind of stuff. Which it's funny in the context of the movie. Yeah. And like towards the end, they're at this cabin, and they've all been eating these pop brownies, and she doesn't realize they're pop brownies. And the other girl's like, man, you've had like 5 of those. Like, why isn't this phasing you yet? Like, you just have like one hellacious tolerance. And she's like, I don't know. And she's like, here's my stash. And the girl from the future looks at it. She's like, this is just like twigs and dirt. Like, she's like, God, your 80s weed just sucks. Like, what if I told you I could give you a gummy this big that has like 100 times what's in that? She's like, wow. Do you have one of those with you? No, I didn't bring. So yeah, it's just a bunch of stuff. It's a lot of it's more on the comedic side, but it's also a halfway decent slasher movie. There's a couple curveballs at the very end too, and actually, since I'm going to spoiler mode, I'm just going to go ahead and talk about him here. They figure out who the killer is and kill him, and they're all like, "Man, it was him!" Like in the future, he's the principal of the school, and so but they killed him, and they're like, "Damn." But then, like, someone else dressed up as the killer just like pops out of nowhere and kills someone else, and they're like, "What the hell is this?" And you find out he's a guy from the future who knew that that someone else was the killer, but he's got like a podcast. It's all about like murder mystery stuff, and he's like, hey, it's hard to keep this podcast going when the only material I have is 3 murders from 35 years ago. So yeah, I set all this in motion to like get some more shit going for my podcast. And his dad was a reporter, and like as they're confronting him, like he had just gone running by and killed him. And like, wait a minute, you just stabbed your dad to death on TV. He goes, yeah, he was an asshole. He's like, now maybe I won't grow up with him living in his shadow.
Wow.
And earlier, the girl had asked the mom, like, hey, so what happens if like my parents don't hook up? Do I just like disappear? And she's like, no, Back to the Future got that wrong. You'll go back to the present, your present. It's just no one will recognize you. You know, you'll still exist because you still exist. It's just you won't have a past there. You know, no one will recognize you. And so she tries to like she screws up her mom's relationship with her dad. And they're supposed to hook up after college.
Yep.
And they end up hooking up now. And so whenever she gets back to the present, she kills the killer in the time machine going back to the present. And so then she shows back up. She's there at her house for a few minutes, and then her best friend and her mom show up. And the mom's like, hey, we need to talk outside for just a minute. And she's like, yeah, sorry. I knew exactly when you were supposed to show up, but I forgot daylight savings time. So, like, I was an hour late. I brought this gun because I wasn't sure which one of you two was going to come out of the time machine. She's like, I was glad it's you. And then this guy comes up and talks to her like she knows her and goes inside. She's like, who the hell is that? And she's like, yeah, you're going to need this. She hands her a notebook, and she's like, the things that are different. And she's like, based on what you told me, I think this is everything that's different now. And like that, yeah, your parents hooked up way before they were supposed to. That's your older brother. And like he had the same name she had. And like, so we have the same name. I don't remember what her name was off the top of the head. And she's like, no, not exactly. And her mom ducks around the corner and says some other name. And it's like, I remembered it, but it's like Constance or something. And she's just like, fuck? Like, that's my name now. God damn it.
Well, you know.
So, like, but the fact the other woman had the foresight to, like, keep track of things that were different, it's like, you're going to need to read this so you know, because time has definitely changed. But, yeah, overall, it's a very entertaining movie. It's definitely worth checking out if you got Amazon Prime. I don't think, it's an Amazon Prime original, so it's not anyplace else at the moment, I don't think, unless it's on Shudder, because they're kind of connected. But, yeah, so that was the new movie that I watched. I watched 2 older movies. One was The Shadow. Alec Baldwin proving he can aim.
After the joke I did where he has
Yes, that's why I said that. The Shadow is set in I couldn't ever tell if it's the 20s or 30s in New York, but it's right around that era, like the mobster era. But I don't think it's during Prohibition because they were quite openly drinking everywhere. So, but essentially, he used to be before I go into that, this is based on pulp serials and I believe radio dramas from like a century ago almost. And this was an attempted adaptation from the 90s. So this is actually one of a series of pulp things that got adapted during the 90s. You had The Rocketeer, you had this, you had The Phantom, and The Mummy. And of those, The Mummy was wildly successful, and the other 3 not so much. But
Plug the camera in while you're doing that.
Okay.
I just noticed it's blinking on me.
Oh,
that's fine. Keep going.
So yeah, so The Shadow, it's Alec Baldwin's the main character, but you also have Tim Curry, Ian McKellen, and I believe it's Penelope Ann Miller, and some other people in bit parts that are recognized, like Victor. Is it Victor Wong? What's his name? The guy that plays David Lopan in Big Trouble in Little China. James Hong, that's his name. So I think I could be screwing that up. Apologies.
See the camera shake. It's me.
Yeah. So anyway, the movie starts off. He's in the Orient, and by Alec Baldwin's character, and he is running a massive opium trade.
As one does.
Yeah. And gets abducted by some goons and taken before a guy who has psychic powers, who trains him to use psychic powers, and then make up for the evil that he's done in his life by going and becoming a good guy. Hence the Shadow. He fights crime, has psychic powers, and shoots people. And then Shiwan Khan shows up, and the people who made this movie didn't do their homework at all. Said he was the last descendant of Genghis Khan. Didn't realize that a third of the men in Asia are descended from Genghis Khan, so kind of a crowded field. But he also had psychic powers. He wanted the Shadow to join him because before he became the Shadow, like I said, opium dealer, and was like really evil person. And let's see, how'd he put it? He would rather destroy a Rembrandt than kill him because he viewed him as like his only equal. And he also, has crazy psychic powers. And so anyway, the movie's good. The effects, for the most part, still hold up, which is pretty impressive for a '90s movie that uses computer-generated effects. But he used them very sparingly. And
Are you saying the Lawnmower Man doesn't hold up?
the Lawnmower Man is about as good as the Lawnmower Man video game at this point. Super Nintendo one.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're about the same in graphic quality.
Yeah. So so the movie's definitely worth checking out. But the reason I want to bring it up is because, like, overall, it's a fairly competently made movie. And, like I said, the effects still hold up. The acting is probably better than it has any right to be for what's probably a throwaway movie to most people. Uh, and it's a mix of action, humor. Nothing's taken super seriously, but it's also not just like slapstick level silly. And like I said, it's also one of several kind of pulp type movies that all came out in roughly the same time era. Might watch The Phantom sometime and talk about it too. Talk about old Billy Zane fighting evil, and a purple leotard. But yeah, so it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't ever seen it. Overall, like it's a decently made movie, which is just not something I come across in modern movies.
No.
Like it wasn't some huge production, but people took time. They built the pieces of the plot leading to the end, and it all made sense.
I think that's what we talked about in the last one. I was talking about what's needed in Hollywood is a renaissance in movies where you don't have giant budgets. Everything's kind of like computer generated graphics are used sparingly, and going back to actors and actresses that are maybe not A-list tier but are good actors.
Yeah.
That they're not. You're not putting all of this budget in the actors. You're putting it into their skill.
Right. And which leads to the next movie, Aliens, the James Cameron film. Now I watched the longer cut. I don't remember if it's a director's cut or special edition, how they define it, but this one includes several scenes that were cut out. And I actually paid normally I just put these movies on in the background while I'm doing something on the computer. I paid a lot of attention to this movie, and it's been a while since I watched it, and I tried to actually take a more critical eye to it this time. And we might end up doing just a whole video just about this, but just some notes here real quick. I feel that it was a mistake to cut all those scenes out. It definitely makes it a better movie, in my opinion. Now, I don't know if that was Cameron's idea or if that was studio executive meddling or what, but
which it was a lot more back then, because that's the thing nowadays is that like every movie feels like it has to be 2.5 hours at least, and there was 80s and 90s. You probably before that, but at least me growing up, 80s and 90s, they cut all the stuff out a lot of times in movies because they had a set runtime that they had to be.
Yeah. Definitely mid to late 90s, the target goal was 90 minutes because you could get at least one more screening during the day in the theaters was the idea.
And I get that to a point, but at the same time, you're sacrificing stuff in the movie. You're taking stuff out that could be good. Sometimes you are trimming the fat where it's not needed either. Where it's just like, there's going to be this drug out scene where these people are just talking. Adds nothing to the movie. Adds nothing to these characters' development. It's just them.
We experienced a little bit of that recently.
I mean, we experience it every time we do a podcast, but
well, I meant in Ahsoka, but because there's a lot of just standing around and conversations that go nowhere, and Like there was wasted potential there. We'll get to that eventually. Uh, but anyway, I can't. I'm sure you've all heard because based on our based on our analytics, the folks listening to this are definitely of the age they should have already seen Aliens. But if you haven't, it is quite possibly one of the best action movies ever made, just like bar none. Which is amazing because the first Alien movies is one of the best horror movies ever made, and James Cameron's just like horror. Ha! How about action with a dash of horror? Let's go with that. And then the rest of the franchise just kind of trails off. But this is peak Cameron here in my opinion. This or Terminator 2 probably. Uh, and I have a few issues with Cameron, but not for his directorial skills. Like the man definitely knows what the hell he's doing. Amazing. He used to be a truck driver. They went to work for Roger Corman. Who, for those of you who don't know Roger Corman, that man is like 94 years old and has 3 movies in production right now. He will work until the day he dies.
Yeah,
Like he just produces movies nonstop, and he knows how to stretch a dollar. Like he's a guy you could bring him $1 million, he will deliver you a movie, and possibly change.
this
It
is
might not be a great movie.
it's just unfortunate we never got his Fantastic Four though.
Yeah, we need to do a video about that. It ain't the most faithful adaptation so far. So I'm not even joking. Um, but yeah, so the thing about Roger Corman though, like he's a workaholic, makes all kinds of movies, makes a bunch of cheap movies, but everyone in Hollywood actually respects him because like he knows his craft. Yeah, the movies kind of look cheap, but he knows how to do it, how to make it happen.
And like, I think Bull. I'm trying to think what his name is.
Uwe Boll, yeah,
Where he,
that's a whole other topic.
where
But
he can make movies cheap but not good.
no, one of his movies is actually decent. It's one that's not based on a video game. It's called Tunnel Rats. It's set in Vietnam. The guys that go into the tunnels to fight the Vietnamese. Yeah, that movie is actually good, or at least acceptable. But I think it was actually on the good end. All of his video game movies are trash.
Which shouldn't be hard to make a video game movie. I mean, it truly shouldn't be.
I'm given to understand that the people that underwrote his movies, that put up the money, essentially he was running a scam like in the producers. Like he was making movies that he knew were going to fail, or at least his investors knew they were going to fail, and that was going to somehow benefit them more than the money they were putting in because of German tax laws. They've since closed that loophole. That's why I haven't seen a lot of work from him lately. And the rest of the video game industry got wise to him. We're like, we're not selling our rights to you. You know, you will butcher them.
Yep.
But anyway, so like for Roger Corman, like people that work for him, if they go try working in the studio, like the studios call him up. You know, like Roger, this guy know what they're talking about. And if Roger says yes, they'll hire him because like all kinds of people worked for Roger Corman. Jack Nicholson used to work for him writing movies. Like I mentioned, James Cameron, he was a truck driver. Bill Paxton used to work for him. Gaylan Hurd, the big producer, she used to work for him. All kinds of people started with him. But like the stuff that James Cameron did for Aliens, like some of the puppeteer work for like the Queen, he was actually working on that, like the prototype for that idea while he was working for Roger Corman. Like there's like some short films that are out there of him like stuff he was doing in his garage and stuff, and you can see where that became the Queen. But anyway, the special edition, for those of you who haven't seen it, the primary thing it includes is towards the beginning, you find out that Ellen Ripley had a daughter. I say had because she died while Ripley was off in space because she was frozen for 57 years. And her daughter died at the age of like 66.
Yes, and if you haven't seen my retrospective on Alien Isolation, you actually follow her daughter in that, and you know it may not be part of the official timeline, but I think it should, and I think it's movie worthy as well. So
yes, which we talked about that in our franchise fixes for Alien, which hopefully you should also watch because I fully endorse this becoming the official version of the movie. And definitely from what Jim has told me, Alien Isolation should definitely become part of the canon for sure, if it's not already.
yeah, and the great thing about it is it fits nicely in there because it's while she's like I said frozen
Yeah.
in sleep or whatever, so you don't have to have any of the original characters in there. They could be just random people because obviously in Alien everyone died.
Yeah.
So the only people that got off there was the cat and
Yeah,
and Ellen.
yeah.
So
The alien briefly, but he didn't have a ticket, so he had to go.
yes, he's probably still living in space somewhere.
Yeah, they never established that no air kills them, actually, so maybe.
Well,
Floating around waiting for the queen from Aliens,
in
she's floating out in space,
in
too.
an Alien Isolation, they do go and put that down that they're able to live outside the space station. So,
Oh, there you go.
yeah. Anyways,
But, yeah, so that you have that scene, and then from that scene, you have a later scene with Newt, where they're in the med lab. There's part of the conversation gets cut out, because Newt asks her if she had a kid. And she says, yeah, but she's gone. And Newt's like, you mean died? She's like, yeah. And there's also a later scene. I want to say it's right before Ripley goes back in to rescue Newt. She says something to Hicks and calls him Hicks, and he's like, "No, it's Dwayne." Finally tells her his first name, and then she's like, "I'm Ellen." And like, I don't know why that little bit was cut because it had nothing to do with the other parts, but it was. Um, that also cuts out seeing the people go to the crash ship. It's Newt's parents are the ones that go out there, and you get to see some of the people in the colony. It's the only time you get to see them. So it would have been nice to leave that in to put a face to the destruction that's going to happen off screen, and then we see the aftermath of. And then there's the auto guns that are set up. Is the whole is about probably 5-6 minutes of movie dedicated just to those. The fact they got them out of the APC and how many rounds they got for them, then actually setting them up and letting them go to town, and like that whole thing really builds suspense for the later battle against the aliens because they sit there and they totally exhaust the rounds from 3 of the 4 guns. And the one has like 10 bullets left in it when the aliens finally back off. And you realize just how many aliens had to have been trying to storm the place to burn through that many rounds. And the fact that, like, that still didn't take all of them out.
yeah.
And so, so you have these scenes that add depth to the movie. But just overall, even way more than The Shadow, the movie is exceptionally well made. Like, in a modern movie, we would see the protagonist. I hate to say this, but especially if it's a female protagonist, would just like randomly come up with powers or abilities to overcome the foe at the end, or it's someone that she massively outclasses
Talk
anyway.
about Ellen does. It's called the power of duct tape
So,
because she
uh,
duct tapes all of the weapons together.
yeah.
So
But this one, it's piece by piece builds up so the end makes sense. Because after she gets back, after she's woken up, they strip her of her flight license, and so the only thing she can do is work in the docks. And they talk about that initially whenever Burke and Gorman come to see her to try to convince her to leave. And Burke's like, "Oh, running power loaders and class 2 license," and she's like, "Yeah, what of it?" And he's like, "No, it's fine work." And then when they're aboard the Sulaco, yeah, it's the
yeah,
Sulaco. I was confused because the other one's the Nostromo.
yes,
Uh, Not to be confused with the Prometheus or the Covenant. But she's like, "Hey, I can run one of these power lifters. Like, can I help you guys?" And you get to see the fact that yes, she can, at least to the point that Abe Pone thinks it's fine. So we establish now that she has the skills to use this thing. And so then we come down to the end. It's like, what the hell is she going to fight the queen with? And it's like, oh right, she can actually use this thing, as we have established by showing that she can do it. That's competent filmmaking. Is showing that your characters can do things so that the finale, when they finally just like go to town on somebody, makes sense, you know. But the other thing is, I think those missing scenes unfortunately remove, like, most of the context is still there, but with those deleted scenes, there's more depth to her relationship with Newt. You can tell that very clearly. It's, I've lost my daughter. I'm now presented with this other little girl. I'm not going to let her die too. You know?
yeah, for sure. And well, and she lost her parents, so
Yeah.
she sees a mother.
Right. But then there's also another layer of complexity I don't think a lot of people consider. That's also what the alien queen is doing. Ripley just murdered all of her kids, and now she's like, I'm coming to kill you, but I'm going to kill your kid first, just because I can. You know? So it's a battle between essentially scorned women, and like, but it makes sense. They're fighting for their kids. Like, it's the maternal instinct.
Yeah,
It's the same thing with Sarah Connor. You know, we understand why Sarah's being the badass because she's trying to protect John. It's not just that she's like, oh, I'm going to pretend to be a man. It's like, no, I have a reason to do this. I don't trust anyone else to do it in Sarah Connor's case. Uh, and so, in Ripley's case, like, and it's also, she's not shown to be competent at the expense of the other characters. Like, Hicks is shown to be quite competent. Gorman's incompetent, but we established that going in. Like, this is like his second combat mission, so we know things aren't going to work out for Gorman. But then we even have like Vasquez. Vasquez is a badass too. Even like Hudson's the only person that jokes about her, and she fires right back. Like his whole like, hey Vasquez, anyone ever mistake you for a man? And she's like, no, you. Funny thing about Vasquez though, folks, the woman that plays her not Hispanic, like not even a little bit. Her name's Jeanette Goldstein, and
She Jewish?
I believe so, yeah. But
I'm just saying with the name.
she's about like now she's about as pale as this table right here. I have no idea how they did that. Like I'm assuming she was just really tanned at the time,
Or spray tan.
or maybe yeah. But yeah, she's not Hispanic. Uh, Nowadays she sells high end lingerie in Hollywood. She doesn't act much anymore, but she's also in Terminator 2. She's John's adopted mom,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and she's also in Titanic. She's a maid or something on board the ship, but her kids are on there too. So at the very end, she's like telling them a story or something as the ship's going down. So obviously, Cameron thinks she can act, so keeps casting her in things. But she's also in Near Dark, which is a vampire movie by Kathleen Bigelow that had the misfortune of coming out the same time as The Lost Boys, and The Lost Boys crushed it at the box office. But she's in it. Lance Henriksen's in it, and Hicks, Bill Paxton, is also in it. So like a third of the cast of Aliens is also in this vampire movie that came out just kind of out of nowhere. Adrian Pasdar is one of the other people in it. He's not in Aliens. But yeah, just overall, it's just a very competently made movie. The main character doesn't succeed at the expense of everyone else. Like again, coming back to Vasquez, Vasquez doesn't succeed at Drake's expense. Vasquez clearly sees Drake as an equal and vice versa. And because like once he just gets like hit with the acid, she's all like, "No, we got to go save him." Now like sucks to be him. She's like, "No, we got to go save him." And they're like, "No, no, he's gone. Like he's dead. Like we can't." And you can tell she was pissed off about that. But the other way you can tell that she's clearly competent, she's the one that takes point whenever they go in at the very beginning. Like
Yeah.
they wouldn't let her do that if she wasn't competent. So you got that. You've got all the character acting, like from Bill Paxton.
Game over,
Yeah,
man.
especially
Game
especially
over.
that scene, yes. And then Hicks. What am I trying to think of there, Jim? In the Terminator movies. Well, the first one anyway, and deleted scenes of the second one. Kyle Reese. What's his
Yes,
name?
I.
Anyway, he wasn't originally supposed to be in the movie. James Remar was supposed to play that part, but he got over there to England, and apparently they have some really quality heroin over there, and he got busted. And so he was out, and James Cameron just called him up. It's like, "Hey, I need you in England. Get over here." He's like, "I'm on my way." And I think it wasn't until he got there he was like, "So what are we filming?" So yeah, it's just a very well made movie, and it's an example of like if you want just an example of how to make a movie, watch that movie. There's plenty of others back in the '80s, but like it's action, but it's not like Arnold and Stallone like over the top single indestructible guy action. It's like no, these people get hurt by regular things constantly or killed for the most part, and yeah, like it's just really really well done. So anyway,
I've got nothing on the movie front, so I will let you.
yeah, I've probably rambled off long enough about that.
Well, actually, there was one thing, and it was just a small tidbit because you mentioned Jack Nicholson, and I guess originally Jack Nicholson did not want to do the Joker role, and they went and offered it to Robin Williams.
Really,
And then when Jack Nicholson heard that, he goes, "No, no, 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 I'll do it." And I guess the way they did that to kind of, I guess, prod Jack Nicholson to do it, and Robin Williams was pissed by it, and I guess for a while they wouldn't do any movies with Warner Brothers because of it until they apologized.
yeah, I'd be kind of pissed off. Boy,
So
what an alternate timeline that would have been.
that's like the Last Action Hero timeline where Terminator was played by Sylvester
Stallone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now there's a quality misunderstood movie, but yeah, nothing really on the book front. Still reading the latest. Well, not the latest, but the most recent book I bought for BattleTech. So plugging along. There is a new novella out, but I think it's only on like Kindle and all those other things. I don't think it has a physical version yet. So, which is a shame since it's about the Jade Falcons, and I'd kind of like to read it. I don't like reading digital books. Which brings us to gaming, where
Yes.
Jim has some stuff to talk about.
Yes. So obviously, being as everyone knows, we keep saying the spooky month. That's just, I guess, the internet trend to call it because October is the spooky month. You know, you got to put all the skeletons and all that stuff out. But one of the things I wanted to do was just kind of vintage horror gaming. So it's hard to imagine that there were horror games actually back in the day, but because obviously the graphics didn't really support those kinds of things. And hell, I've got a list here, and I probably could think of even more now that I think about it, because I didn't even think about the Turbo Graphics, which had Splatterhouse, the very quintessential horror game, because you're pretty much like Jason Voorhees, and you can smash people with a baseball bat and other sorts of weapons and stuff. You're possessed by a mask, and you're trying to save your girlfriend from like all sorts of horror things. But
So kind of like The Mask.
yes, well, but it's more.
But Eric Roberts instead of, well, I guess he has a kind of a horror thing.
Well, it's more of a if Jason Voorhees was possessed by his mask. That's what it looks like. But I just marked that one down. So so if you happen to have a TurboGrafx, actually, I think there is a TurboGrafx Mini, and I believe it does come with Splatterhouse on it. Um, but just a couple of consoles that if you wanted to see some horror games for, start off with the 2600, because who the hell would think that the Atari 2600 could have horror games? Obviously, the quintessential one is Haunted House. But speaking of Halloween, there is a Halloween one on there as well, where you play as Jamie Lee Curtis's character trying to save the children.
Okay.
And you have to save the children, and it's just a point-based game. There's not a way of winning it, but you just get points for every children you save. You don't lose points when the children get murdered by Michael Myers, but
Man, Michael Myers didn't kill any kids in the movie.
well, he does in the game.
Well, sorry for minor divergence here. In the more recent Halloween movies that follow up the first movie, the first of which the new one is just called Halloween, there he kills like a 10, 12-year-old kid, but in the others he didn't.
I just like the fact in Alien vs Predator
Requiem, yeah.
That you get to see a face hugger on a child.
Yeah, and then the chest burster.
Oh yeah, but and there's another one for the Atari 2600, because not only do they have Halloween, but they also have Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They're very rare games, so the only way you're probably going to play them is through emulation, but they're out there. Going into the 8-bit range, now some of these I'm going to kind of just explain why I have them on the list, because they may not seem, and some of them may be in multiple consoles too. The very first one I have is Metroid. Now, Metroid on its own isn't scary, but it's the atmosphere. You're going in to a strange planet. There is just alien creatures everywhere. Everything's trying to kill you in some sort, and it's just maze-like, and there's just no story behind it. It doesn't give you, in the year XXX or whatever. There's no story. You just jump into it, and you just know what you're supposed to be doing, kind of thing.
So no year 20XX, Dr. Wily has launched his robot rebellion.
Nope.
And it's up to you to stop him.
Nope. And then there's a few that are obviously, inspired by horror movies, or more classic horror movies like Castlevania. You've got your Dracula, Frankenstein, which is like the reverse of Castlevania, where you are fighting Frankenstein versus Dracula, but Dracula's one of the mini bosses, or not mini bosses, like the bosses before.
Yeah.
Then Frankenstein also turns into a giant, like takes up the whole screen somehow. I have no idea how, but that's what happens. And on one of my previous Tales and Collecting video, or the first Tales and Collecting video I did, I mentioned, I mentioned one game, but there's another one I did not mention I would like to get, and it's a Japanese only game, but they do make translation files for it called Sweet Home. Now, Sweet Home was specifically, they say it was the predecessor, because it's Capcom, the predecessor to Resident Evil. Uh, Very cool, 8-bit, going in through a mansion kind of thing, solving puzzles, that kind of stuff. Uh, definitely one of those translation games I want to get. Um, and on top of that, and I'm going to mention the other one that I had in the Tales of Collecting video when I get to the Super Nintendo. But to finish up the regular Nintendo, and again, this isn't in a comprehensive list. This is just some ideas if you want games. Obviously, Ghosts and Goblins, just because they're Ghosts and Goblins.
Sure.
And then speaking of aliens, believe it or not, Alien 3 for the NES is actually a pretty decent game because there's not one alien. There's tons of aliens, but it's a premise of being on a prison planet, having to free the people because I guess they get kidnapped by the aliens, and you go and you save them before they get you know turned into breeding stock for
Yeah.
the aliens. So Alien 3. And Alien 3 is also on Super Nintendo as well, which I'm getting ready to go into. So for Super Nintendo, and I did this on my Tales of Collecting, Clock Tower. Again, another Japanese game that you can get translated into English. Very good. Great music. The villain, while fairly underwhelming, is just looks like a man child carrying giant shears that stabs people with them. And I do mean a man child. Like he's obviously an adult, but he's the size of a child wearing like the schoolboy kind of
Yeah.
outfit kind of thing. A little weird, but yeah. So Clock Tower, like I said, you can buy it on eBay. Usually, I got mine for $20 on eBay, and it's fully translated, plays on the Super Nintendo just fine. And again, I had Metroid on the NES. Super Metroid's another good one. Music, atmosphere, just turned to 11 on it. Again, nothing inherently scary about it, but it's just the atmosphere, the music, the sound. That very first opening scene, going to the space station and seeing all the scientists, killed. Um, Very good. And another also, I'm going to mention this I mentioned it in the Nintendo. It's in the Super Nintendo, and there's also a version on the Sega Genesis, and that is for the Super Nintendo, Super Ghouls and Ghosts. For the Sega Genesis, it's Super Ghosts and Goblins. All different games. So if you have a Super Nintendo, you have a Sega Genesis. I do recommend both of them. I do not have it on the Sega Genesis though. I
Hmm.
do have it on the Super Nintendo. Another one that is on both the Sega and the Super Nintendo is Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Again, it's just zombies, and it's a cornier game. It's not scary by any means, but it's a fun two-player game where you use squirt guns to shoot zombies. And there's other things. There's like these like little babies with knives, obviously like inspired by Chucky.
Yeah.
Different things like that, kind of unique. Um, and there is I have to look it up. There's a one for the Sega Genesis I was just thinking of where you play a poltergeist possessing people, trying to scare them, or possess items in their home to try to scare them out of the home.
Hmm.
I have to look that one up. But the one that Bobby mentioned for the Sega Genesis is, or Sega CD, I should say, is Night Trap. Night Trap is like I don't know, like a B movie horror game kind of thing. It's not scary by any means, but
No.
it's very campy, very whatever. A fun one, again, one of those games that you could play with, like I would say, you could play with the kids, even though it's funny to think about it that back in the day that was one of the two games that caused the ESRB rating to be put into place, and it is so stupid that was something that was causing the scare or whatever. So, but like I said, there's a few of them in there that, like I said, they have the ability to not really scare, but to unsettle in some things. Like I said, Super Metroid, the music, Clock Tower, the story is kind of creepy. There's jump scares in it. I mean, they do them very well. Now, if you want to get into something that that's early horror that actually has those scary elements, the ones that the one I definitely remember me personally playing was the first Resident Evil. Now, dialogue, yes, is very corny.
Oh, Jill, you master of lock picking?
No, you were almost a Jill sandwich. But no, the cinematic views, that very first zombie that you see used to scare the shit out of me. And you look at it now and you're like, well, this looks terrible. But I can tell you right now, on Steam and everything, there's a renaissance of PS1 styled horror games.
Well, also, if you want the first Resident Evil, but like better, there is it's not a remake, but it's not an upgrade. You know what I'm talking about.
Well, so because they did the one on the
I'm trying to think what the title of it is.
well, they
But
did the okay, so they did the one on the GameCube.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
And you don't really lose a whole lot on it because they pretty much keep everything intact. It's just better visuals. It's
Well,
a
they add more to the plot.
what would they? Yeah, I'm trying to think because it's not a
It's a remaster. Is what I'm trying to
remaster.
think. Yeah,
Yes,
but it's not a straight remaster. They actually I want to say they added like another third of the game to it.
that and Resident Evil Zero was also pretty good.
Yeah.
That you figure out how Rebecca Chambers gets into the mansion.
Yeah, zero and one are like right around the same time, similar to how two and three are. Because two literally takes place in the middle of part three.
Yeah.
Because there's a point in time where your character's unconscious, and that's like where two takes place. And then you wake up right afterwards.
Yep. And so these are all for the PlayStation One. So the ones that I mentioned right now. So at Resident Evil, you have one, two, and three. Um,
I think Code Veronica is the first one for the PlayStation Two, isn't it?
it was originally for the Dreamcast, but then they made a PlayStation Two version of it. Silent Hill again, great on the PS1. And the one thing about Silent Hill is the the fog was a limitation for the PS1. They couldn't do the draw distance like they wanted to, so they put fog everywhere. And so the one thing that makes Silent Hill almost makes you shit your pants half the time when you know, it's all just because of hardware limitations.
For those of you who've never seen it, you should check out the movie also. It's literally dripping with scenery.
Yeah. And then this one, so those are pretty common. Everyone knows about those two. And the last one I mentioned here, this is one again. The one guy I work with from Canada had always mentioned about was Parasite Eve. Now, Parasite Eve is very, very reminiscent of Resident Evil. It's again a parasite, I believe, instead of virus. But and I know that Resident Evil 4 was a parasite, not a virus. But Parasite Eve did it first, and Parasite Eve was, I think, one of the first games that I had, and I don't have it now, but that I had. It was a 2 disc. Um, but yeah, and I would go further into like GameCube and stuff like that. I know we mentioned a couple, but this is more because I'm into the retro stuff,
Yeah.
and for people that want to have that vintage experience and just wanted some ideas on there, definitely check out the list. It's and like I said, I didn't mention everything. These were all some of them off the top of my head. Yes, I had to look some of them up because I couldn't remember the name of them. Sweet Home being the one for because it's Japanese only, and I do not own it. Um, Probably very shortly after this we're done filming, I may go and own it. Because again,
Yeah, there you go.
great thing about those types of games is because they're essentially ROM hacks because they're taking the Japanese version, translating them. They're usually not expensive. The problem is for some of them is that if they use legitimate boards, is that they're sacrificing other games to make the boards. So they'll take like a copy of Super Mario and wipe the ROM and put it on there instead. So
Yeah.
but the ones that I seem to buy are completely um, like new boards because they do make new boards that you can buy, and then they just buy like cheap cases and put labels on them. So I don't feel too bad about that because if it never came out in the U.S., it's just another way you can actually own these games or actually play them and play them on legitimate hardware.
Yeah. So probably does it for gaming.
Yeah.
All right. So on to streaming. This week saw the end of Ahsoka season 1 and the beginning of Loki season 2. I thought there was a little bit more time between those, but apparently not. Still haven't checked to see how many episodes of Loki there are this season, so we're not gonna throw that out there yet until we know. We watched both of those this week. We have videos for both of those out. Uh, do have some other kind of random thoughts on Ahsoka now that we've had some time here and we're not crunched for time to get everything in and get it uploaded and everything. Um, Obviously about to be some spoilers here. So I'm pretty sure that all of the main characters should have died at one point. Whenever they're approaching the fortress and like the Star Destroyer just opens up with the turbo laser batteries, because those explosions should be just like ludicrously powerful according to the math behind them, which means that even if they weren't the power levels that people say they were, which is in like the I believe it's the gigaton range. Um, Even if they're not that powerful, the explosions themselves, just as depicted on screen, should have been enough to kill them because of how close they were to them. Now I know Hollywood has a real problem with like showing how explosions actually work,
Yeah.
you know, but the problem is we actually have like a Commando situation here, because in Commando, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie from the 80s, there's a moment where he takes on something like 200 guys and basically gets like a scratch. But he kills like 5 guys by throwing a grenade in their general direction. Meanwhile, he has a grenade blow up next to him, like as close to him as Jim is to me right now, and he just kind of like rolls in the grass and is just fine. That should have killed him, but it's a big dumb action movie, so we ignore it. We have the same thing here in Ahsoka. In episode 7, Sabine fires a little wrist rocket and kills like 3 stormtroopers with it. And that thing should have been like a firecracker compared to the blasts from a Star Destroyer's turbo lasers, which are hitting like right next to them. They should have all been dead. Like, and I get that, like, action adventure and whatnot, but like, no, just don't do that.
Yeah.
If that's your thing, like, just don't even put the scene in there because it just strains credulity. But also, like, as much as I love the zombie stormtroopers and everything else, Thrawn knows they're coming. There's only one way up. Just mine the shit out of the stairwells.
Yeah. I mean, they mined the around the planet when they knew they were coming in.
Right. Or destroy the stairwells. Like, don't even bother with the mines, just blow them up. You know?
Yeah, because if they're trying to climb up the side of the thing, there's no way they're going to make it.
Yeah, because if they climb up the side of the thing, then just open up with the turbo lasers again, or the TIE fighters, or whatever. So there's that. And then there's also, like, oh, so the ship finally took damage. Like, it clearly took a lot of damage. And, like, Hu Yang and the turtle people, like, fixed it all in, like, 20 minutes. Like, to the point that there's no visible damage anymore. And it's space-worthy again. Like, no. Like, this is Dave Filoni doesn't know how to construct, like, an actual, like, competent thing, is what I'm coming around to here. Like, it's entertaining, it just doesn't detract, but if you approach this even remotely critically, this whole show falls apart. And that's not good. Uh, but you got that. The whole, like, okay, so we all jumped on board the ship and we're taking off, and like no one on Thrawn's Star Destroyer is like, hey, there's a ship behind us. You want us to, shoot it? Something like throw a rock at it? Anything? Detach one of our engines that doesn't work? Just let it drift and hit them? Like something? Anything? And it's like, no, like Thrawn should have been told that. At which point, then he'd just be like, it doesn't matter. Like the distance, they can't close it. We're out. That's all it would have taken to make that scene make a little more sense. Uh, so yeah, there's just these parts that just like someone just doesn't know what the hell they're doing on this show. And I've got the feeling it's Dave, because I saw this short on YouTube with Sam Whitmer where he's talking about this scene that they filmed for I think it's Clone Wars, where Anakin's talking about, man, I wish my mom could have met Padme, and Sam's like, this is a great scene, Dave, but his mom did meet Padme back in the Phantom Menace. They had dinner. Dave's like, oh. It's like, I just don't think Dave's like the guy that's going to carry the franchise forward, is what I'm trying to say here. So,
Well, and it's one thing to have someone like him to say, "Hey, this is what I'd like to see. I'd like to see some of these kind of cool elements," but then you need to get people that actually are down in the.
well, there is. Leland Che is the guy who used to be in charge of making sure the canon all worked. And I think he still works for Lucasfilm. And I've got the feeling that like there's several points throughout this show he's like, Dave, no. And he's like, but Leland, yes. So yeah, I don't know. So there's issues with it there, and it's just, yeah, like they should have been dead like 10 times over. But also, thanks to a little video these people put together, which if I think of it, I'm going to link to it in the description. It's a trailer for Ahsoka as if it were a 1980s TV show, and it brings up a bunch of valid points. Like, Ahsoka will defeat the whoever using heretofore unseen powers, like water breathing, from that episode that she was underwater for like hours and hours and should have been brain dead. Or, what was the other one? Quick change, where she just, like, in the span of 5 seconds, is able to put on a spacesuit and walk out of the ship.
Especially one that conforms to her head
Yeah.
tails, or whatever they call them.
And whale songs, what they called it, where she's talking to the purple.
But that is actually
yeah, it is. But anyway, and then it's the Hu Yang part. It's like, and then Hu Yang, a 25,000-year-old droid with more knowledge and experience than any living creature in the entire universe, quite possibly the most valuable relic in existence. Now in charge of ship maintenance. Like, I brought that up like back in episode 1 or 2. Like what? Like, this is just irresponsible bringing Hu Yang here. Like, no, he should be like on Coruscant, like making copies of himself or something, and giving one of them to Luke. Like, Ahsoka is clearly like, fuck it, I'm not going to train an apprentice. Boy, it's a shame I don't know anyone that is. Oh, right, Luke. Oh, he's in the other galaxy now. Whoops, my mistake. Like, she's just irresponsible. Not as much as Sabine, who suffers no consequences from her irresponsibility. Like, no one's even like, you just let Grand Admiral Thrawn go, huh? Like, to get Ezra, who may or may not be able to help us, but is now in the other galaxy.
Again, away from all
and
view.
We're stuck here. You know? Again, like the trailer's like, they go to rescue one of the last Jedi by sending one of the last Jedi to go after him, but they are fought by the remnants of the Jedi, and it shows Balin's skull.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it brings up a lot of good points, and I know they're fans because, like, the Andor trailer is pretty funny too, but it doesn't, like, it doesn't really mock the show. Except for the part where it's like a man chosen by happenstance to lead the rebellion. Is like, yeah, pretty much.
So, did you see the one image that I sent? It was just a brief thing where they're talking about Shin. That what Shin was doing, Shin and the bandits. There's a possibility that that's where where the Knights of Ren come from.
Oh no, I didn't see that. I hope not.
Because I get where they're coming from, because the people kind of had a resemblance to it, but I say they did at least leave a couple of points, because obviously Balin, I think that's going to be probably the more interesting plot point that's got to be solved
once he finds his way to Mordor.
I think with Shin, it's more of just she's going to be the minor inconvenience to let Balin get his plot moving.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. That's my thought on it. Is that, and then like as I said in the Ahsoka episode, I call her Ahsoka Quinn, medicine woman, because she's pretty much out in the prairie now. Is going to that it's going to be their plot on how to get back. I mean, obviously, not that I don't know why they need to get back. It'd be great if they just stayed out there, and then that explains why they were never.
I've seen people that are like, Dave Filoni is pulling a fast one on all of us. He just wants them out there so they don't have to be in the shit sequel trilogy, and then he'll bring them back later. Because he's like, I can protect my characters, right? No. Sorry, Thrawn. Good luck.
Which I wouldn't want to. That, and I'm trying to figure out this growing trend of making Thrawn look like Ronald McDonald, calling him Thronald McDonald.
Haven't seen that one.
Oh, I've seen 2 different variations of it. I'm like, like I was calling him Elon Thrawn, and everybody else seemed to, I've seen other people that took on that, but yeah, I have no idea where Thronald McDonald came from.
Well, I mean, like linguistically, I see it because Ronald McDonald, Ronald McDonald. But like, is there a deeper connection? I don't see it.
I don't know. If there is, let us know.
But no, I've seen some people that bring up a very interesting point with Thrawn and why a lot of people have a real problem with how he's being written. There's 2 problems. Number 1, it's impossible for you to write a character smarter than yourself because you just don't know how they would think. You just can't do it.
Well, and I think the only way to get it by that is you literally have to reverse engineer everything so that everything he does.
Well, right, but even then, it's a matter of like, if you're not smart, you're not smart enough to know what good tactics are. You know,
Yeah, because like you said,
to then go back.
because the first thing would be like if he's just trying to escape, like you said, they should have never made it in the door.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it should like send TIE fighters on a strafing run, or bombers, or just or the turbo laser raiders should have killed them. Like
Or
just straight up, that plan should have worked.
yeah,
It
well,
just didn't because of bullshit reasons.
you know what they could have done? Barricade, put a barricade on the other side of the door, so like let them think they're going to open the door, but they go to open and there's just
Yeah,
a barrier there, and then the turbo lasers just finish them off.
yeah. I mean, yeah, that's what they should have done. And this is a problem of what is it? It's not quite a Deus Ex Machina kind of situation, but it's close. It's where the writers have written themselves into a corner, and the solution in a in Greek plays was literally a god would show up and fix the situation for them. That's why it's called Deus Ex Machina. And but here it's more of a, well, we'll just have a bullshit contrivance of like physics are just going to stop working for a few minutes here, and it's the same thing, but yeah, but you have that, you have the problem of, like I said, you can't write someone smarter than yourself. Despite what I think it's Gene Hackman says in some heist movie that I can't remember the name of. I think it's him. But his line is like, someone asks him how he comes up with the plans, and he's like, well, I imagine a man smarter than myself. And then I ask myself, what would he do? And it's like, well, that's great, but you literally can't do that because you're not smart enough to actually think of the plan. So you can't be smart enough to think of what a smarter person's plan would be. It just intelligence just doesn't work that way. So anyway, you have that, but also the problem is with Thrawn. What Thrawn does works in novels. It's like grand sweeping plans with intricate little moving parts. Star Wars is the end of Return of the Jedi. Like, you can't tell me there's like some grand strategy at play there that you can tell by what's actually happening on screen. It's just a bunch of awesome scenes in a battle.
Yeah.
You know, you can't. You know, you don't have like uh, Admiral Viet isn't sitting there like, okay, you know, the execute plan X-37B, you know, like three of the Star Destroyers go off over here, and like some go over here, and like bombers go over here, and all of a sudden it all clinches together with like Home One gets destroyed or something. It's like, no. It's just a bunch of scenes with the Death Star blowing shit up. You know, there's nothing there. And so that's what Star Wars is. So Thrawn's plans are like what I just said. That doesn't look exciting on screen.
Yeah.
And so people are going to be like, wait, this is it? It's like submarine combat. It's just not exciting, you know,
I don't know.
despite what the Hunt for Red October would lead us to believe. It's normally like, hey, there's an enemy sub, fire a torpedo. Oh, we hit, they're dead.
You've killed us.
Yeah. Yeah, good job, Stellan Skarsgård. You arrogant ass. Love, was that his name?
Have to ask Owen. Hey, oh, he's not
Wow.
here.
But yeah, so there's problems with depicting Thrawn in live action that we're going to run into. And I think that's why we're going with like, oh, plus the whole like they can't think of anything better. It's like, well, strategy, of course, would mean using bullshit magic powers. Because to them, that's what it seems like. It seems like it's magic. Because they don't understand the intricacies of how it works.
No, I did like the fact though that Thrawn pretty much, taunted Ahsoka after he was leaving.
Yes, now that they got right, where he's just like, whatever, I win, peace. With that whole like that parting jab of like, maybe you'll be like your master. Like, that's Thrawn. Like, that worked. You know.
Well, even his thoughts. Well, I know how Anakin would have behaved during this. I know how you're going to behave.
Yeah.
And they could have really surprised if she came up with her own plan because she had gone off the warrior's path into the peacekeeper's path.
But, yeah, maybe.
But that would involve writing.
Yes. Which they can't do right now.
No. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe they're just.
It could be because people speculated that like that's why Balin's part kind of sucked at the end was because had they like the moment Ray Stevenson died, they would have gone in and done some work to make things better, but they can't because of the strike, and they can't afford to wait because they got to get content out there. So Yeah, the only casualty of the strike I care about. I don't care about late night TV. Those people can stay off the air forever. They're not funny. But yeah, so then we had Loki. Infinitely better written.
Yep.
Very entertaining. Just picks up right where the other episode left off. You know, and then a little glimpse of 1980s McDonald's.
Yep. Yep. Reminds me of an ad I saw from it was 1980s Taco Bell.
Yeah.
That was interesting. The menu items and how most of the menu items are still there in some capacity. I think the only one that wasn't was the enchilado. And I think they do still occasionally make a comeback.
Yeah, did I tell you about
Oh, the other one was a taco burger.
no, that's up there with the one McDonald's I went to in Ohio one time that sold pizzas. Didn't see it at any other McDonald's. Didn't try those either. I heard they were terrible.
What, the McPizza?
Yes, McPizza, something like that.
When I was in Florida, they had hot dogs at theirs.
Yeah, there's
McDog.
there's I don't remember where it is in Ohio, but it's where they test a lot of stuff for food franchises because the town is like almost exactly demographically like the distribution of the United States. It's like spooky how close it is, and it's like kind of not really like in close to any other major cities, so it's like not a lot of crossover, so they can get like real feedback and not just like randos passing through and stuff. And it's just one of those things, kind of like how several franchises are headquartered in Louisville, also. You know, just one of those things. But yeah, yeah, definitely looking forward to the rest of Loki.
So, speaking of both Ahsoka and Loki, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because I keep seeing things about it, and I went and checked, is that Disney Plus is going to be upping their rates, doubling the cost. Well, roughly doubling. I think it was $79.99 and then $140. Yeah, so doubling. Yeah, it would be exactly double.
No, because 79.
Oh yeah, right.
79
Right.
is essentially 80, which
Yeah,
is 160.
sorry,
But it is quite close.
sorry, it's late for me. Yes, it's almost double, but the idea is
still an increase of $60.
Yeah. So what the
per year. Just to be clear on that one, folks.
yes. So yeah, because that's the way they charge. They charge it annually, and because what they're doing is they're saying if you want premium without ads, it's going to be the $139.99. And if you're okay with the ads, you can keep it at the same rate, which is $79.99. Now I already went and switched mine to the $79.99 because a few ads, as long as they're not like sprinkled all the way through, like throughout the shows multiple times, I think that would get kind of annoying. But like even watching with Paramount Plus, I think when I watch an episode of like Strange New Worlds, whatever, I may get 3 ad breaks in there.
Yeah,
and they're usually 60 to 180 seconds.
That does lead me to wonder something now.
What?
You know how like a lot of episodes of Ahsoka are like around the 45-minute mark? That's what an hour on cable a show actually is. It's 44 minutes, if I remember right.
So you're thinking 15 minutes of commercials?
I'm thinking that's why those episodes are 45 minutes, because they knew they were going to do this.
Maybe.
So once they poured them in, people they're not going to notice that that all of a sudden now it's an hour-long show.
Yeah, as far as the streaming services go, I got rid of Netflix, and I know this sounds weird, but as much as I love watching movies, I hadn't been watching movies on Netflix. It had been 9 months since my last movie before I got rid of it, and I'm just like, and the good news is that since you have it, if there's ever a movie that I would want to watch, we figure that out at some point.
Yeah, well, given their crackdown on password sharing, you probably have to record at my house, but
well, that's what I meant, but.
Yeah, there's that. Like, I keep toying with the idea of getting rid of Shudder, the horror one, but it's like $6 a month. And even though I only have it for one show, which is only on for like a third of the year, although the good folks at Shudder finally wised up to that, and it's Joe Bob Briggs's last drive-in. And up till now, he would film like dozen episodes, 14 episodes, something like that. And, excuse me. And they would just play sequentially once they start, week after week. They're live on Friday nights. And then he does like a Thanksgiving special, a Halloween special, a Christmas special. Last year they did a Valentine's Day special, and there might be one of those specials sprinkled in there somewhere. Okay, so he's got enough episodes. It's basically about a third of the year. And the folks online are like, if Shudder was smart, they would have these so they run every other week instead of every week. And instead of two movies, it'd be one movie. And you could really stretch this out, and people wouldn't just subscribe and then stop. And well, that's what they're doing next season. There's gonna be more episodes, and there's gonna be gaps between them. And yeah, it's you know
Well,
which from their perspective is smart. I'm okay with it because I'm still subscribed anyway, and I'm probably not going to drop it. So now I can lie to myself and be like, well, I have to because of the.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think all of these subscription services are going to start combining up, rolling up. Because I noticed with Paramount Plus now, they're rolling in Showtime,
Yeah. Well,
and they're
that's
putting stuff exclusively on Showtime. Because my son Grant wanted to watch the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, which they have Nickelodeon on Paramount Plus, but not that. They have that on Showtime, so he couldn't watch it. And it's like $6 a month. $6 a month more to get Showtime included.
yeah. Well, that's yeah, we briefly hit on this concept when we were talking about the writer's strike in one of the episodes, but that's what's going to happen. These streaming services can't all survive because people are not everyone's dumb, and several people are like, I'm paying more for these than I was for cable. Like,
Yeah, I'm sure Dish Network and DirecTV are like, my gosh, we'll just offer better, packages and
yeah,
get those people. Because my thought is that I figured that Dish Network and DirecTV are on they're on their way out. It's the people that it's the older group that have it right now. By the time obviously, when people pass and everything, that those numbers are going to continue to dwindle because
well,
people don't see that because they want to get everything a la carte.
right. Well, that's if those in the cable providers are smart, that's what they'll do is just provide a la carte instead of be like, no, if you want HBO, you've got to get all these other bullshit channels. Like, no, I just want HBO. How much is that going to cost me? If they're smart, that's what they'll do because then they'll be like, or you go to streaming where you need like 10 different services. They're going to cost you more than what we're charging you. And it's like, no, I don't want that. So the services will eventually hit a point where they can't individually stick around. Disney, even though they're having trouble, they have a big enough library and a wanted enough library. They can succeed on their own. Although, once they buy out the rest of Hulu, they'd be stupid to not just fuse it together into one single thing.
Yeah,
Because there's no reason to have two services. And they should do the same thing with ESPN that they also own, unless I'm mistaken.
which I think right now they do have ESPN included
Well, I
into.
know they have other packages, but I mean, like, it should
Yeah,
just be one thing and be like, it costs more than Disney Plus costs because you're gonna get the other stuff. But be like, here it is. Here's all of it. You know,
yeah, because I mean their portfolio right now. I mean, like even Disney Plus alone. I mean they've got you've got the Pixar, you've got Disney, you got Star Wars, you got Marvel,
right,
and you got National Geographic.
right.
So you've got your document. I mean, they pretty much they have the package there.
Yeah, they've got their stuff. Paramount's the one that I don't think can survive on its own. HBO Max, well, it's Max now, which is stupid. It should say HBO Max, but I think it has enough because it has basically the Warner Brothers catalog on it. Plus all the stuff they make for HBO, all the shows. People like those shows. Some of them are available on DVD, some of them aren't. So I think they could probably survive. And then Netflix is the juggernaut because they just keep buying up movies from all over the world, and people keep watching them. So, and they've got their own original content. So I think they'll easily make it on their own. Plus, if any of these others really straggle, Netflix will just buy them up. You know,
I always like the fact that Blockbuster had a chance to buy Netflix.
well, Coke had a chance to buy Pepsi. Now, mind you, for whatever it's worth, folks, those of you are like, oh, they should have, they probably should have, but Pepsi only really surpassed Coke for a very brief moment in the 80s, unless I'm mistaken. And once they brought back Coke Classic, ever since then, Coke has been the dominant number one. To the point that, do you know what the number two selling soda is? It's not Pepsi. It's Diet Coke.
I could see that.
So when your shit tasting saccharin laden drink is higher selling than the flagship product of your nearest competitor, you've won the game.
Well, New Coke is supposed to have the flavor of Diet Coke, but not all of the. It's still sugar and all that stuff.
Uh,
And that was one of those decisions. They said, if we would have just had New Coke in Classic Coke, New Coke would still be around.
Probably, I've heard some conspiratorial minded people that the reason they did it, they knew they were going to take the hit. It was because that's when they switched from sugar to corn syrup, and they had to like disguise the switch. So they put out the new Coke, and then they brought back the other one a couple of years later. So it had been a while since people tried Coke. Like, oh yeah, this is what I remember, even though it's really not. It's close.
I like the fact though that they have brought back sugar in some drinks. Like I think I've seen Mountain Dew where you can get it with real sugar and
Yeah, well, you can with Cokes. You buy the Mexican Cokes, the tall glass bottle ones, not the short ones. The short ones are still good, but the tall Cokes, they're from Mexico and they use cane sugar. And yeah, to your point, I think there's others. Then there's other drinks that just never stopped, like Jones Soda uses cane sugar, and they also make the tall glass bottle Sprites and I think Sunkist, and I assume they're the same way. And the Sprite definitely tastes different too. So
sorry, my cat was about ready to take over the camera. She was trimming on the cable, pulling on it. So
you know.
which would have been great. I mean, it made for great content, but no, no. So the Paramount Plus, like they got some good movies on there and such, and I mean they got the Nickelodeon library, which I think is a benefit to them for like the kids front. Uh,
Yeah.
hey, stop that cat.
Yeah. Uh, that's all I got on streaming. And that movie I mentioned earlier, Totally Killer, that's a streaming movie. That's on Amazon Prime. Uh, yeah, so we got. I do have one miscellaneous thing. I sent you the video on it. I just want to briefly discuss it here. If you don't have anything else on streaming.
No, no, no.
All right. So, those of you out there who have ever fiddled around with ChatGPT, there's a new evolution of the basic concept behind it that I had personally pondered if this were possible and what one could do with it, and apparently I wasn't the only one. Folks far smarter than myself who know how to actually make it happen have made it happen. So I only downloaded ChatGPT a few weeks ago, and quickly came to understand, like, yeah, I can see this thing going places. But also, a question occurred to me: could I get two instances of this to talk to each other, or three, or four? And so some people have done that. And I don't remember the names of the programs themselves because Google has one, and I think Microsoft has one. I could be mistaken on that, but I know it's one of the two. And essentially, they have made it so you can build an office staffed with ChatGPT, essentially, as each person in the office. And so what you have is like you have the office manager whose overriding job is to make sure the task gets done that you've assigned it. And it's like, okay, if I want to like write a computer program and I tell it the parameters, the manager makes sure that it gets done. It's like, okay, I need to assign this part to the programmer over here. The programmer starts and comes back with something. And he has a manager above him who makes sure the program works, like tests it and everything, finds the problems, and it actually like writes up documentation for the program and everything and instructions. And then like the manager's job is like make sure all this happens correctly. And you can also do this like for art and everything. Like there's like different divisions, and so they're all AI bots essentially. They each have their own task, and then they have a manager they report to make sure the task is being done. And then they have the office manager to make sure the overall task is being done. So each one is an instance, and they're all doing separate things, but they're communicating with each other to make sure it all works right.
So first of all, do you have to have an HR department?
I don't know. I don't know if there's digital harassment or not.
Because the one thing I've learned about anything AI is anytime it gets on the internet, it learns to most of the time hate humanity.
Yeah, I watched a video of a guy explaining how ChatGPT actually works, and there's some interesting parts of that. And he was like, "So there's this other part that we try to do, and I don't remember what it's called, but it's essentially to make it like have human values. Because it's like we found out that the moment you expose AI to the internet, it becomes wildly racist really quickly, and like, and that's bad. And I agree, that's bad.
Yes.
And so like they have to like to train it to not do that. All right, and so that was something you mentioned. But the other interesting thing is how it all works. It has to do with it's large language learning, where they basically just dumped in as much of what humanity has written up to this point on as many topics as possible into a machine to try to learn, and had it run for the equivalent of 300 years to learn what it's learned thus far. And essentially, it was able to transform. It was able to assign numerical values to every word in the English language, and then figure out how those interact into a very complex math problem, essentially. And so the guy had a picture. He's like, "So yeah, you probably never thought the English language could just be a two-dimensional graph like this." And he's like, "And you're right. This is only like what our brains can handle. The graph inside the machine actually has 12,000 some odd dimensions, which would basically be like a Lovecraftian horror of some kind for us to try to contemplate." And assuming this guy is correct, he's like, "There's literally parts of this we don't know how it's doing it. Like we set it to do it, and like it's just like taking on a life of its own, essentially. As far as like some of the values it's assigning, like we have no idea where the computer's getting these values and what they necessarily mean in human terms." Because they were like, "Well, a neural network works for humans, so let's try it with a machine," and well, it seems to.
Have they seen Terminator?
They have, because he kept trying to stress that, like, but bear in mind, this thing is still no smarter than this table. It doesn't know anything. It just knows how to break down language to try to figure out what you're actually asking and to figure out how best to answer. But at no point does it understand what any of these words
Yeah.
actually mean.
So technically not artificial intelligence at
Right.
all.
It's not really artificial intelligence as we perceive the concept.
Yeah, because it's once they start actually understanding what they are.
Right. It's not self aware,
Yeah.
is the issue. So, and if we keep it there, we're fine. Because then we run into actual ethical issues. And as much as I'm like, it's a machine, I don't care. On the other hand, if it's an actual thinking being, even though it's not organic, I should care probably, because it is at that point some kind of a life form. Like, I don't want to be, what the hell was that guy's name on Star Trek The Next Generation? It was like, we need to disassemble Data so we can build more of him. I don't want to be that guy. I'd much rather believe I'm Picard in this matter, where he's like, "Well, we're trying to find new life, and there it is, damn it." No, they didn't say damn it, because it's not Picard, it's Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah.
Picard, he like cuts a blue streak in Mannix? Is that his name? I think it's Mannix. Because he's in season 1 of Picard, different actor. But he's in it. Because I guess Data actually became friends with him after that, and like conversed and whatnot. So, because he wanted him to succeed in what he was trying to do, just not at the cost of tearing him apart. Uh, but yeah, so it's nothing, and it's not anywhere near that. But it's developing a way to strip down what you're asking, knowing what the important words in the question are, and then reverse engineering an answer to it, essentially. But it's the other one, the let's get a whole bunch of them together. That one might be the first step in problems.
Well, I mean, just for people that work in an office, like
Oh, well, that'll be problems for those people for sure. But like,
you mean like I do.
yes, because like I've mentioned before, I think that like I could literally get. I think I could get this thing to write a book. I've gotten it to write a chapter so far that's fairly competent and way better than my writing. So like I just have to keep fiddling with it to figure out what all it needs to know from me to transform into something else. And once I hit that like magic spot, because I know it works, because there are people that are doing this already, selling tons of books this way. The office thing, that's like the next step in the plan there. Because that's like, here's some ideas. You guys storyboard it and tell me what you got, you know. And there's two versions. There's one that has human input at various steps. There's one that you just like hit the button and let it go, like Elsa. But there's apparently like some actual cost to it because it uses an API that you're paying for. But like the guy was like basically told it make the game Flappy Bird for me, and like the monetary cost of that was like 40 cents. So at that point, like I'm sure a novel's like 50 cents at that, if that, you know, and one sale will make that back. Yeah, that's a worthy investment. So, well, I'll get back to you folks on that once I download it, and assuming it doesn't like turn into Brainiac and start attacking me or something, we'll be all right.
You just don't get the Allspark next to it.
Yeah, no, that would be a very bad idea. Yeah, so that's about all I got for miscellaneous. Though I came across some videos about that, like, and they just came out a couple weeks ago. Like the one I think, like I said, I think it's Microsoft or Google, one of the two. They just had a big presentation about all the stuff they're working on. They didn't even mention this. They just put it out there like an afterthought, like, oh yeah, we got this thing over here too. And the guy doing the video is like, that's like the centerpiece. He's like, which tells me they're working on something even bigger that's going to use that because it's all open source. I want to say theirs is, or it's in the Creative Commons. So anything you make from it, you can sell, like without paying attribute fees to anybody. Which again tells me that they've got something else that they're working on that's going to use that.
Well, stuff like this is going to be what takes us to the Star Trek timeline at some point. Because
Yeah, because even that thought even occurred to me. Like, this is basically the Star Trek thing where Picard asks Data a question. Data knows how to best ask the computer the question and then interpret it back to Picard. Like Data wouldn't have come up with it on its own, but the moment Picard throws the idea out there, Data knows where to run with it, and then you've got the database on the ship that knows everything. You know.
Well, but I'm saying like people not having to work anymore.
Oh yeah, the utopian.
Yes.
But just remember one thing, Jim. People like all utopias. They always talk about dystopia stuff. Like there are no utopias. It's all dystopia, just with a nice facade. Like just keep that in mind.
Well, yeah, but the other problem is that you have to run through World War III first before you get to that.
World War III, the eugenics wars, luck out and meet the Vulcans.
Yes, and not shoot them with a shotgun.
Well, I mean, the Terran hegemony wasn't terrible, was it? It was.
Yeah.
It was very terrible.
So I do have one miscellaneous one, and this was just a brief thing I was watching. There's I think it was on the Dark Five, which is just they try to have like creepy stories, and I realize like half of them are crap. But there was one supposedly for Apollo 14 that there was one guy on there. I don't remember who it was. It was one of the astronauts was wanting to do a non-sanctioned experiment through ESP, and was like I guess there's like a set of symbols that they use for doing ESP test, and he was communicating supposedly with people back on Earth through ESP, and I guess with what they had on the test, like how many symbols were matched up or whatever was actually fairly high given the circumstances.
So beyond what random chance would account for is what you're saying, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And ESP, extra sensory perception.
Yeah.
So being able to communicate through your mind to people, which I don't understand why NASA would be really against that. If you're just like, hey, I'm gonna take this brief moment to just Charles Xavier from over here. And
devil's advocate here for a moment. They wouldn't want it becoming public because they probably think there's no chance it's going to work. And then they're going to people be like, this is what our tax dollars are going for. Like, this is dumb. Like, you can't bend spoons here on Earth. We know the commies were lying about that. And that's why. That's my guess.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure, like, behind the scenes, NASA is probably like, go for it, just don't advertise it. Let us know how it turns out.
Well, I mean, that's like all the just looking at all the Apollo stuff. I mean, there was one guy that left his family photo up there. And, they said, well, obviously, if you went back to the landing site, one, it'd probably be covered in dust. But two, let's say it was sitting up there still pristine, it'd be bleached.
Yeah, yeah. In all likelihood, the flag we left up there is white by now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they wasn't like a special flag that they bought. They just
because the solar radiation is
They just like went to the store and bought a flag. I think the only thing different was is that they had to sew a like a channel in the top for the post to go through because otherwise the flag wouldn't.
Right, because no wind.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, technically there are solar winds, and I think there are things that would move. Not it wouldn't flap in the breeze, but it wouldn't be enough to keep the flag
Right.
erect. But I wouldn't say that there isn't because the one thing misconception is that space is a vacuum. It's not an absolute vacuum. There is stuff and there is things, there is movement. Um, it just happens to be that I believe that simulating a vacuum gets you the closest to what it is like in space.
Yeah.
So, I believe, well, that's like I saw this video where they were trying to explain. This guy was trying to, a dad was trying to explain to his daughters that that we don't live inside the Earth. They're like, but what keeps the sky up? I thought that was like the top of the Earth. And they're like, no. And not understanding the concept that gravity is actually what
Well,
pulls.
in fairness, Jim, like that was what people believed at a certain point in time was not crystal spheres. That's from D&D, but the general concept of like that there's a sphere, you know,
Like a snow globe.
like a snow globe. Yeah, I mean it essentially is a crystal sphere is the concept, but I don't think the Greeks called it that. And like there's like concentric spheres going out, and then like Mars would have its own spheres, and at some point they interact, and you know the sun has his, and they interact, and you know you had that was the concept for a while. Believe it or not, though, actually Ptolemy, who I don't know if he's part of the Ptolemaic dynasty or not, Ptolemy in ancient Egypt, actually I think had it figured out the whole like the Earth goes around the sun and the other planets are all you know like I think he had a lot of that figured out, and it wasn't until millennia later that the Europeans finally figured it out and like and then stopped excommunicating people for it.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't surprise me though, because like one thing I don't believe people are as ignorant on is that people that are part of the flat Earth Society, I think, are just more of just. I think they're trolling people.
Well, their logo, the comment under it has something to do with like membership all around the world. Like that's what it says.
Yes, our globe.
And they think the other planets are round.
Yeah,
Like they're like, well, clearly Mars is round. We can see Mars. We know it's round. Like it's only the Earth that they're like, you know, and it's like, come on, guys. All you have to do is go to a sufficient height in a hot air balloon and you can see the curvature of the Earth.
yeah, yep. No, it's So there's some of that I'm just like, they're just bull, whatever. But no, and like I get them not understanding that because I mean, even to a certain age, I didn't understand that gravity is literally what holds the atmosphere. There's no barrier. It's just gravity pulls in. That's why the atmosphere gets thinner the higher you
Yeah.
go up. Um,
Yeah.
but I felt sorry because his dad couldn't explain that to these kids because it's not something easy to explain. Because I mean,
No, it's not.
no, I mean, if even me just saying, oh yeah, gravity holds the atmosphere, it holds the air molecules and all that stuff close to the earth, and then that's why it gets thinner. And people are like, but there has to be a barrier, and I'm like, well, no,
No, it just kind of thins out.
it thins out and just stop. It just kind of dissipates into space at some point. There's no actual physical barrier.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, well, I mean, hell, there's still, as I understand it, there's still debate on the exact mechanics of gravity. Like, we all know it exists. Well, most of us know it exists. Like, we can demonstrate what it does,
yeah.
but the how, there's still, like, some debate on the how, apparently.
Well, I feel sorry for those people that didn't know gravity existed until Isaac Newton invented it. As people
Yeah.
say, Isaac Newton invented gravity. You're like, no.
Well, it's like, you ever see Idiocracy?
Yes, yes.
And they're walking around at one point. One of them comments like, "Man, I bet this is what Einstein felt like walking around." And it was like, "Yeah, that's probably why he invented that bomb." And it's like, he didn't invent the nuclear bomb. Like, he was wildly against it.
But
Yeah. Now, if you ever see Oppenheimer, like, he's in there. Einstein's in there as well. Several other characters, obviously, but And he tells Oppenheimer at one point, like, well, you've succeeded, and, now you have to bear the weight of your success. Like, they blamed me for what you did, and now you actually you accomplished it, so now you have to bear the weight of it.
Yeah. That was just something I watched, and I thought it was kind of a neat little topic or whatever. ESP
Yeah.
on the moon.
Yeah. For those of you who ever watched Starship Troopers, by the way, which we should do a video on sometime, one of the main differences in the book, old Doogie Howser's character, I don't think has ESP in the book. Or if he does, it's like nothing like what it is in the movie. And he gets killed like a third of the way in the book. He's not alive at the end. And definitely not dressed like an SS officer.
Speaking of that, I guess there was a tattoo trend going around where people were getting what they thought was like the Gen Z tattoo, but it was the Z from the SS.
The double lightning bolt.
This one was just like
just the single.
Is a single, or was this? It's a Z with a line through like the middle.
Okay.
And it was one of the markings. I don't know if it was a specific division or whatever, but then somebody's like, brought that up, and they're like, oh.
You guys might want to reconsider this.
So there's probably a few people having to get a tattoo covered up, and the few that are probably like, I knew what I was getting.
Jim, in our lifetime, there's going to be I know we're going to see a point where people are like, man, this really awesome crooked cross symbol. I'm going to get a tattoo of this, and people get like, you know what that is? Or yeah, it's the Hindu symbol for friendship. Like, well, something else too. Just so you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's I don't know. I was going to talk about that in one of the BattleTech videos because they renamed this one tank. Because there's a tank that, depending on where it's manufactured in the inner sphere, is either known as the Rommel tank or the Patton tank. And they decided to drop the Rommel part of the name in the recent update. And they've got some legitimate reasons, because new people to the game are going to be confused if the same machine has two different names on the box.
Yeah.
Just call it one name. Okay, cool. But the problem is, like, in universe, there's no reason to do it. Like, it's the year 3150. Like, I hate to make this commentary on humanity, but no one gives a shit what happened in World War II in 3150. Like, they're just like, that's some general from the past who is a contemporary for Patton. Like, they don't care. Like, Rommel being a German and not a Nazi, wasn't a member of the party, but fought for them, so arguably was. I'm not going to go into that. That's, personal call, whatever, but clearly on the bad guy side, not trying to defend the guy. But 1,000 years from now, no one's going to give a shit about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like
it's horrific, it's terrible, but think about what we think about the Roman Empire. Like, the Roman Empire did an awful lot of horrific shit too. We don't think about them, for the most part, don't think about that. We think about...
The men do.
We think about, like, the architecture, the governmental style, we focus on those parts. Some people acknowledge the other parts, and a few people are like, oh, how can you glorify them? They were awful. Like, yeah, they were awful. They also built most of the modern world in one way or another. Like, I'm not saying the Germans did that, by the way, in World War II, just to be crystal clear on that point. Yeah. I'm just saying that, like, in our lifetime, that's going to happen. Forget 1,000 years in the future. Like, no one sits around like, oh, the damn Kaiser and the Huns from World War I. Like, in the future, those are going to be like, oh, those bad guys from the Call of Duty game. People aren't even going to know about World War II.
Yeah, I mean, it's already kind of going.
Yeah, it already happens. Like, I know that they pick, like, the dumbest responses they can whenever they go for those man on the street things. But, like, there's people out there that are like, I don't know who fought World War II, like us, and they'll just name off some random shit.
Well, that's like the Mexican American War. They're asking people on the street who fought in the Mexican American War, and they can't even get one of the.
Can't get one of the two that are in the title of the war. Those things, I always kind of wonder if, like, they misunderstand. They're thinking, like, who, like General who, General this, like, I like to tell myself, maybe that's where they're going wrong. They don't understand they're saying which countries, even though they're probably literally saying that.
Yeah. And
you're like, I don't know, Texas and Cuba?
Well, I saw one where the guy goes, just name one woman. And he's asking a woman who couldn't have just named herself. He said, come on, Do it. Just name one woman.
Oh, those feel like those Celebrity Jeopardy episodes where it comes down like Final Jeopardy and Trebek is, just like tears up the card and he's like, you know what? We're just gonna go for numbers. Just write a number. Doesn't matter what it is. Like Sean Connery has, I think it's IV, and he's like, well, despite your best efforts, Mr. Connery, that is in fact a number. That is the Roman numeral 4. What'd you bet? You see the rest of it, just the top of the letters for suck it, Trebek. And he's like, ha, 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 ha. And Trebek's just like, I don't know why I do this.
Well, there's also the one where it's, just write a word. Any word. He writes below. He goes, below is a word. Hey, you got it. It's below me. Yes, below me, Trebek.
Yeah. But, yeah, just, you know, like it's just one of those things. Once you're far enough removed from an event and no one that was there is still alive, like it's like what do they say in the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring? Uh, History passed into myth, and myth passed into legend, or something like that. Then the ring sat there for 2,500 years. That's what happens. You know?
Speaking of which, that's another discussion topic. I watch a lot of. There's a couple of YouTube channels that I watch that are like just the lore of Lord of the Rings, and there's one where I guess like Sauron had been looking for the ring, like had been
Yeah,
all through that area, and that
yeah. Sauron was attempting to either get the ring or to make his own.
yes, he did both. He made his own and tried to get
Yeah, yeah.
so. Which makes sense because I guess Saruman and Sauron are from the same. Um,
The
they're
Sauron and the wizards are all the same tier of being.
no, but I'm saying is that the because you've got the Luvatar, or it's the step up from them.
Eru is the overgod, and then you have
Because you have like
the Maiar and the Valar.
it's the Valar, right?
I believe the Valar are the lower ones. The Maiar are they're the ones directly below Eru, and the Valar are the ones below them. The Valar, if there's an allegory for the Valar, they're angels essentially.
well, so they both worked for the same one, Saruman and Sauron. That's why they're both ringmakers.
No, no.
I believe. I could be wrong on that. I think that was the and the fact that both of them fell to the dark side, pretty much.
Well, I don't know that has to do with that because Sauron was always was most of the time he was a disciple
Melkor.
of Melkor and went to work for the other one like covertly essentially. So
Yeah, but I guess there was a point in time where after Melkor was defeated, he tried to like repent, but then he's like an
he is in the outer void. There is no repenting.
well, no, not Melkor, Sauron. Sauron while he followed Melkor, did not care for Melkor because Sauron is a man of order.
Well, to a point, he actually is a very loyal servant, uh, which is surprising given all that happens later that he would play second fiddle. But he was a very loyal servant, and once Melkor was gone, whenever Sauron took up residence in Numenor, after it's in the Second Age, if I remember right, they defeat him. Well, they defeat him because he comes out and surrenders.
Yes.
And the elves and Elrond are all like, you cannot trust anything he says. He is the deceiver. You should throw him in the deepest, darkest hole you find and bury it and never look back. And they're like, yeah, Elrond, whatever. Get out of here, pointy ear. And he comes back, and by the time he comes back, he's like the advisor to the king.
Yes, and that's why they start worshiping Melkor.
Yes, and he starts worshiping Melkor, and that's when he convinces them, hey, guys, well, fun fact, the elves are immortal, right? They're keeping that secret of how to do that from you. It's in the Grey Havens. Take your fleet and go take it. And they're like, capital idea, chum. You be in charge while we're gone. It's like, all right, sure. I will accept this humble title you have bestowed upon me.
Well, that's when you got the faithful Numenorians are like, yeah, we need to get the hell out of here.
Yeah. So they sail, and that's where Manwë, the guy directly below Eru, is finally like, Eru, we have lost the plot. We can't control these people. They're assaulting the afterlife, trying to get the immortality. Bail us out. And Eru's like, I will, but you're no longer going to have dominion over Middle Earth. And they're like, all right. He's like, all right, well, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to hurtle a meteor at Numenor, which is what happens. And Manwë had sent his divine eagles to try to like defeat Sauron, and Sauron, one of his abilities is essentially to counter other magics, basically. And so he was able to rebuke them, even though he's a lesser powerful being than Manwë. Literally, like goes up to the top of the temple and like does his thing to try to fight them off. And then once Numenor is destroying, he's literally just laughing his ass off as the whole place is falling into ruin. And that's where he loses one of his forms, because beings like him and like Sauron and Saruman, they can have their form destroyed and they can reconstitute, but they can never assume that form ever again. And that's where his fine form, kind of like an elf, was destroyed, and that's when he took up the visage of the armored, conqueror, and so because he had other forms, he was a werewolf once.
Yeah, so it was Lord of the Werewolves, I believe.
He was the biggest Lord of. Yeah. I read the summary. I didn't watch the cliff notes.
I just watched the cliff notes.
I'll let you borrow my copy. You should read it sometime.
Well, I find it all interesting.
Oh, it is. It is. It's very interesting, and I'm glad Amazon didn't get to fuck it all up in their quest for ratings. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's
about it. We could. I think that's going to be another podcast topic for another time. I think we can get into some Lord of the Rings stuff. Like I said, mine's mostly from just watching other YouTube channels and different things. And
yeah, I've read the Silmarillion, the Hobbit, and the trilogy.
Have you read the Lost Tales?
I haven't read the Lost Tales, and I haven't read like the stuff that his son wrote, like something about Hurin and a couple other things he's written based on his notes. I haven't read that stuff
because I believe like the Lost Tales are just short snippets of things that were on Tolkien's mind but didn't get put into any sort of story format.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in there, but it might be in his letters.
That may be what that is.
That could be what that is. Yeah. There was one thing that I know we just said we're done, but I do want to throw this out there because I just thought of it because of that. There was one thing that he never could reconcile because he was a Catholic, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So he in his core didn't believe that people were born evil, but the orcs are. And the orcs are presented as irredeemable, and like internally he had a problem with that, never figured out a good solution for it. So that is one of those things. Also, if I remember correctly, the orcs are also immortal. Because there's one.
They should be because they're supposed to be corrupted.
They're corrupted elves, yeah. But whenever Sam is going to rescue Frodo I believe it's Angband is the name of the fortress up there at the top, or is it Cirith Ungol?
Well, Angband is where
it's Cirith Ungol's one.
Yeah, because Angband is where.
Which king?
No, that. Which king of Angband? Wasn't it?
Angmar.
No, Angband is where Melkor was at.
Yeah. Okay.
I think.
So Cirith Ungol is the fortress up at the top near Shelob in the pass up there.
Mm-hmm.
And the book, one of the orcs is like reminiscing about the last war, the one that was 2,500 years ago, like as if he was there. So I'm pretty sure they're immortal too. So.
Well, speaking of which, I saw a thing that was the. Again, we'll probably need to save this for that, but it was
finish your thought, and then we'll cut out.
It was like the size of the dragons before, like Smaug, as big as he is, was a very small dragon.
Yeah, well, it's because Melkor made them, but didn't wait for them to fully mature to their full size to use them.
Because Galrun was huge, but is it Angolian?
I couldn't tell you on the dragons.
The black one. He's like massive. I mean, like they showed, like Smaug was like, and then this.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, it was crazy. But anyway, so let us know if you want us to have a whole entire podcast of just talking Lord of the Rings. I will have to do some research and some video watching.
I'll give you some reading material, Jim.
Well,
I do have a copy of the Lost Tales. I just haven't read it.
Well, like I do is the one that I've been watching is the where they take like the travels of somebody, and they'll talk about their entire travels throughout Metal Earth
Yeah.
and stuff. So, anyways, we've gone on long enough. It's time to end this meeting
Yep.
of the Geek Cabal. Just like normal, I mean, I think we've made comment about the like, comments, shares, and subscribes and stuff. Hell, I don't know. It's been 2 hours.
I don't think we did in this one, but go ahead and throw it out there because we always appreciate all of that. So anything you feel like doing, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Even if it's negative comments, because we want to know where to improve. So.
I say, yeah, criticism's good. Just telling us that we're stupid doesn't help, but telling us why we're stupid, that does.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's all that I've got. Definitely had a long one. I think this one probably 2 hours.
Yes, it is. So.
All right. Anyways, thanks
Alrighty.
for listening. Thanks for watching if you're watching, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you out there.